Imagine, if you will, a hallway of infinite length. The walls are paneled in dark, polished mahogany that seems to absorb the very light that dares to enter it. The floor is covered in a plush, velvet carpet that muffles the sound of even the most deliberate footfalls. And there, standing in the center of this interminable corridor, is the protagonist of our shared human experience, the individual. They are staring intently at a door. It is a grand, imposing structure of brass and oak, standing at the very end of this long, shadowed passage. The individual stands still, their posture rigid, eyes wide with a mixture of longing and exhaustion. They believe, with every fiber of their being, that this door represents their life, the promotion, the marriage, the healing, the creative breakthrough, the peace that passes understanding. They are waiting. They have been waiting for what feels like an eternity. They press their ear against the cold brass, listening for the sound of a latch clicking, a hinge turning, or a voice from the other side. But the silence is absolute. This is the great paradox of the human condition. We operate under the delusion that life is something we are waiting for, rather than something we are actively generating. We treat time as a formidable jailer, a warden who doles out our joy in measured, stingy increments. We believe the door is locked from the outside by a mysterious force, fate, karma, a distant deity, or the indifferent hand of chance. We see ourselves as victims of the interval. We accept the not yet as a natural law of the universe. Yet, as the shadows lengthen in this hallway, a deeper truth begins to stir. The individual does not realize that their very stillness, their very act of waiting, is the gravity holding the door shut. The locked door is not a barrier imposed by the universe. It is a manifestation of the mind. The hallway is not a transit zone. It is a museum of postponed dreams. To understand why the door remains shut, one must first realize that the individual is not waiting for life. They are actively, subconsciously, delaying it. To deconstruct the nature of delay is to confront the terrifying realization that our perceived limitations are, in fact, our own creations. In the realm of the spirit, there is no such thing as a passive state. Even when a person stands perfectly still, their consciousness is vibrating at a specific frequency. When that frequency is labeled waiting, it is not a state of suspension. It is an active state of creation. Why do we delay? Why does the human mind, which is ostensibly designed to seek growth and expansion, construct such elaborate architectures of postponement? The answer lies in the psychological sanctuary of the future. The future is the only place where we can be perfect. In the future, we have all the money we need. In the future, we are healthy. In the future, we are loved and understood. By anchoring our identity in the future, we protect ourselves from the vulnerability of the present. To move now is to risk failure. To wait until the circumstances are right is to maintain the illusion of control. How does this delay manifest in the mechanics of our reality? It happens through a process of mixed expectancy. We tell ourselves we desire the fruit, but we are terrified of the responsibility of the harvest. We say we want the new career, but we fear the change in identity it demands. Consequently, we create a reality that mirrors this internal conflict. The universe, which acts as a vast, resonant mirror, does not respond to what we say we want. It responds to the vibration we are. If your vibration is waiting, the universe will provide you with an infinite supply of reasons to wait. It will provide the stalled traffic, the unanswered email, the lack of capital, and the lack of clarity. This is the recursive trap. We observe the lack, the delay, we interpret it as proof that the time is not right, and therefore, we continue to wait. We become historians of our own disappointments. We use our past evidence of delays to justify our present hesitation, which in turn ensures our future stagnation. The philosophy of true spiritual power, however, dictates that the observer and the observed are one. There is no external time that governs the soul. Time is merely a sensory illusion designed to help us perceive sequence. When we stop viewing time as an enemy and begin to view it as a medium, a blank canvas upon which we paint our intentions, the hallway begins to dissolve. We must ask ourselves, are we waiting for the door to open, or are we, through our very belief in its locked state, the ones who have padlocked it from the inside? Consider the story of Elias, a man who possessed a singular talent. He was a master clockmaker. He lived his entire life surrounded by the rhythmic ticking of thousands of timepieces, each measuring the seconds, minutes, and hours of a life he never quite managed to start. Elias wanted to build a masterpiece, a grand astronomical clock, that would track the stars and predict the tides. He had the schematics drawn up on fine parchment. He had the brass, the gears, and the finest springs gathered in his workshop. But every morning, Elias would wake, look at the project, and sigh. The conditions are not right. He would whisper to his reflection, I need better illumination. I need more seasoned wood. I need a sign that the market will appreciate such a thing. Year after year, Elias waited. He became the most respected clockmaker in the city, yet he never built his masterpiece. He spent his days repairing the clocks of others, obsessing over their timing, their efficiency, their mechanical precision. He became a prisoner of the very tools he mastered. One winter evening, a traveler stopped by his shop, a woman who carried no watch, yet arrived at exactly the moment the sun dipped below the horizon. She looked at the abandoned schematics of the masterpiece and asked, Elias, why do you serve the clocks when you were born to command the time? Elias laughed bitterly. I am waiting for the perfect moment. I am waiting for the stars to align. The traveler stepped toward him, her presence filling the cramped, ticking room with an unexpected stillness. The stars have been aligned since the dawn of creation, she said. The only thing that has been waiting is your conviction. You treat the project as a burden for a future version of yourself rather than a living seed within you now. You aren't waiting for the right moment, Elias. You are waiting for the fear of beginning to subside. But the fear is only there because you are looking at the clock instead of the craft. That night, Elias did something he had never done. He ignored the ticking of the 1,000 clocks. He picked up his chisel, placed it against the wood, and began to carve. He did not wait for the sun to rise. He did not wait for his hands to stop shaking. In that singular moment of action, the air in the room shifted. The future he had been waiting for collapsed into the now. Within a week, the masterpiece was half finished. He realized then that the materials had been perfect all along. It was the maker who had been missing. The transition from the hallway of waiting to the threshold of arrival is not a matter of changing your circumstances. It is a matter of changing your posture. You have been standing before the door with your hands clenched, hoping for a miracle to shove it open. But the truth, as we have seen, is that you are the master of the house, and the door has no lock other than the one you have projected onto it. To embody this truth today, you must perform a radical act of ownership. The audit of expectancy. For the next 24 hours, monitor your thoughts as if they were blueprints for a building. Whenever you catch yourself saying, I will be happy when, or I am waiting for this to happen, stop. Recognize that you are currently manufacturing a delay. The act of as if. Identify one thing you are waiting for, whether it is a career shift, a relationship milestone, or a personal state of peace. What would you do today if you were already living in that reality? Would you buy the professional tools? Would you speak with the confidence of someone already fulfilled? Do that thing. Even if it is small, even if it feels symbolic, it is the shovel with which you begin to dig your own path. By taking these steps, you cease to be a passive observer of your life and become its active architect. You are no longer standing in the hallway. You are turning the handle. But a question remains. If we have been the ones keeping the door closed all this time, what happens when we finally open it? What is this mirror that time reflects back at us? And why does the world look so different when we stop looking at it through the lens of a clock? In our next chapter, we shall step into the light of the mirror itself. We will explore why the world and everyone in it is not a collection of obstacles, but a reflection of the very state you have been holding in your heart. The hallway is ending. Are you prepared to see what is waiting on the other side? Imagine a grand, gilded gallery, stretching further than the eye can perceive, lined on both sides with towering mirrors framed in ornate, blackened silver. A seeker walks down the center aisle, their footsteps echoing with a rhythmic, hollow cadence. They approach the first mirror, expecting to see their own visage, but instead, they catch a glimpse of a different version of themselves, a version that is slightly older, burdened by a heavy cloak of unfinished business. The seeker pauses. They reach out a hand, and the reflection mirrors the gesture perfectly. But then, the seeker lingers, waiting for the reflection to move on its own, waiting for it to reveal the secrets of the future or the solutions to the present. The reflection remains frozen in the exact same posture of anticipation. It is here that the paradox strikes. The seeker assumes they are looking at a window into another world, a place where time moves differently, where their good is being prepared by unseen hands. They believe the reflection is an independent entity, a sovereign reality that holds their fate. But as the seeker stares deeper, they notice that the reflection is not moving because they have stopped. When the seeker breathes, the reflection breathes. When the seeker trembles with anxiety, the reflection mimics the vibration. The gallery is not a collection of windows, it is a hall of mirrors. The world is not a sequence of events unfolding to the individual. It is an echoing chamber of the individual's own internal state. We are conditioned from our first breath to believe that we are subjects of time, that we must look into the mirror of the world and wait for the image to change, to improve, to finally smile back at us. But the mirror never smiles unless the observer smiles first. The mirror never moves until the observer steps forward. Society is built upon a foundation of profound, well-meaning deception. From the cradle, we are fed the mantra that good things come to those who wait. We are taught that patience is a passive virtue, a noble endurance of the interval. We equate waiting with holiness, with maturity, and with wisdom. But to deconstruct this, we must ask the forbidden question: why is waiting elevated to a virtue? The answer is found in the psychological defense of the ego. Waiting is the ego's way of abdicating responsibility. If we are waiting, we are not failing. We are simply in a state of grace, awaiting divine permission. It is a psychological armor that shields us from the necessity of taking action. By labeling our stagnation as patience, we transform a state of fear into a state of spiritual superiority. How does this philosophical error permeate our existence? It creates a recursive loop of delayed identity. When you adopt the persona of the waiter, you begin to identify with the absence of your desire. You speak it in the hesitant tone of your prayers. Please, if it be your will, let this finally happen. You carry it in the tension of your shoulders, a physical manifestation of a person who is constantly leaning forward, perpetually off balance, never grounded in the present. Why does the universe permit this? The universe does not permit or forbid. It merely reflects. If your consciousness is tuned to the frequency of not yet, the universe, in its absolute, mechanical obedience, provides you with the reality of not yet. The mirror of time reflects your internal definition of yourself. If you define yourself as a person who is seeking, you will always be in a state of seeking. If you define yourself as a person who is arriving, you will find that the path shortens, the doors shift on their hinges, and the time you thought you lacked suddenly expands. How do we break this cycle? We must accept the terrifying responsibility that we are the authors of our own timing. We must move beyond the social contract of good things come to those who wait and embrace the spiritual reality that good things manifest for those who recognize that the good is already present. To wait is to imply that the good is distant. To act is to demonstrate that the good is here. You are not a victim of the clock. You are the one who winds it. In the late 18th century, in a crumbling manor on the edge of a desolate moor, lived Lord Alistair. Alistair was a man of immense lineage, but even greater inertia. He spent his days in a velvet-lined study, staring out a window at a dirt path that led toward the horizon. He was waiting for his inheritance, a mythical fortune promised by a distant, dying uncle, a sum that he believed would restore his family to their former glory. The house fell into disrepair around him. The roof leaked, the tapestries rotted, and the servants departed one by one. Yet, Alistair remained in his chair, his eyes fixed on the path. He refused to repair the floorboards, for he told himself, "Why fix what will soon be replaced by the grandeur of my new life?" He refused to plant a garden, for he said, "I will be gone before the harvest." He lived in a state of normalized postponement. He told everyone who would listen that he was a man of patience, a man who respected the sacred timing of the universe. When a local farmer offered to buy a portion of his idle land to cultivate, Alistair scoffed. "I am waiting for the inheritance," he said. "I cannot risk the land being occupied when the wealth arrives." Decades passed. Alistair grew thin, his skin pale as parchment, his eyes dimmed by the perpetual glare of his own expectations. He died in that chair, a man who had waited for a future that was, in truth, an illusion. After his passing, the executor of his estate arrived to clear the manor. They found, hidden in the floorboards of the study, the very floorboards Alistair had refused to repair, a cache of gold coins and deeds to the land, placed there by his ancestors generations prior. The wealth had been beneath his feet the entire time. He had spent his life staring out the window, praying for the good to come from the horizon, never realizing that he was sitting on a mountain of abundance. The tragedy of Lord Alistair was not that he was unlucky. It was that he had become so loyal to the idea of waiting that he blinded himself to the reality of his possession. He treated time as a barrier, never realizing that time was simply the mirror reflecting his own poverty of spirit. The story of Alistair is not a cautionary tale of the past. It is a mirror held up to your own life today. Every one of us has a floorboard of gold that we are ignoring because we are too focused on the horizon. We are waiting for the job, the partner, the miracle, all while standing on the very resources we need to create it. To integrate this truth, we must change our internal vocabulary. We must stop identifying as seekers and start identifying as stewards. The daily audit. Tonight, when you prepare for sleep, write down one thing you are waiting for. Now, beneath it write, what am I currently ignoring, refusing, or failing to steward because I am too focused on this waiting? Are you ignoring your health? Are you neglecting your craft? Are you refusing to speak your truth to those around you? The law of stewardship. Commit to one act of mastery over your current environment. If you want a grand life, you must treat your current, ordinary life with grandeur. Clean your workspace, organize your finances, mend your relationships, not because you are waiting for the reward, but because you are demonstrating that you are a person who deserves to be entrusted with more. When you stop treating the present as a waiting room, the mirror of time stops showing you a stagnant image. It begins to show you a version of yourself that is active, aligned, and powerful. You are the architect of the image. Change the way you look at the world, and the world in all its stubborn, beautiful mystery will be forced to change its look to match you. But there is a catch. Once you stop waiting and start acting, you will feel a shift in the air. The gap between who you are and who you intend to be will begin to vibrate with a new, intense energy. Some call this the frequency of the gap. It is the space where miracles are born, but it is also the space where most people get frightened and return to the safety of their waiting. Are you brave enough to remain in the gap, or will you retreat to the hallway? In our next chapter, we descend into the frequency itself. We will learn how to bridge the distance between the seed and the fruit without losing our minds to the silence of the process. The mirror is clean, the stage is set, and the resonance is building. Are you ready to see what happens when the observer and the observed finally collide? Imagine a vast, sun-drenched field in the golden hour, where the wheat stalks sway in a rhythmic dance, whispering secrets to the wind. Beneath the surface of this tranquil landscape lies a truth that defies human logic. The seed and the harvest occupy the exact same coordinate in the divine mind. There is no physical distance between the potential of the wheat and the reality of the golden grain. The difference is purely a matter of frequency. A farmer stands in the middle of this field, hands deep in the warm, loamy earth. He holds a single seed between his thumb and forefinger. To the untrained eye, the seed is small, brown, and seemingly inert, a fragment of nothingness. To the farmer, the seed is the entirety of the harvest. He understands that the tree is already locked within the grain, and the fruit is already encoded in the bloom. The gap is not a measurement of space. It is a measurement of the observer's patience and perception. Most people look at their lives and see a vast, agonizing stretch of empty road between where they are and where they want to be. They see the gap. They look at their current state of lack and their desired state of abundance, and they perceive a chasm. They believe they must bridge this chasm with the blood, sweat, and tears of linear time. But the paradox is this: the moment you acknowledge the gap as a reality, you solidify it. You anchor yourself on one side of the chasm, watching your desires drift further into the fog of the distance. The air grows heavy with the scent of ozone, the charge of potential energy before a storm. This is the frequency of the gap. It is the space between the intention and the manifestation. Most souls fear this space, for it is silent, dark, and seemingly empty. Yet, it is within this precise frequency that the alchemy of creation occurs. To understand this, one must stop measuring the distance and start matching the frequency. To navigate the gap, one must first dismantle the illusion of linear causality. The human mind is hardwired for sequences. If I do A, then B will happen, and after sufficient time, I will achieve C. This logic serves us well in the mechanics of engineering, but it is a catastrophic failure in the mechanics of the spirit. Why do we rely on this linear sequence? Because it feels safe. It allows us to track our progress, to point to a calendar and say, I am halfway there. It provides a sense of control in an uncontrollable universe. But how does this reliance sabotage our deepest desires? It does so by creating a frequency of lack. When we say, I am working toward my goal, we are broadcasting a subconscious signal that says, I do not have it. The universe is an echo chamber. It does not hear the words of our desires. It hears the rhythm of our state of being. If you vibrate with the frequency of I am getting there, the universe will ensure that you remain perpetually getting there. You become a master of the process, but a stranger to the result. How, then, do we break this recursive loop? We must employ the principle of already done. Why is the already done state so powerful? It is because, at a quantum and spiritual level, all possibilities exist simultaneously. The future is not a destination to be reached. It is a reality to be accessed. When you align your vibration with the fulfillment of your desire, not as a hope for the future, but as a current, internal fact, you collapse the wave function of time. You stop monitoring the lack. How does one monitor the lack? By checking for evidence. By looking at the bank account to see if the money has manifested. By looking at the calendar to see if the timing is right. By looking at the mirror to see if the healing is visible. Every time you check, You are signaling to the universe that you are still in the gap. You are telling the world, I am looking for proof, because I do not yet believe it is true. This is the psychological wall. The more you focus on the when, the further away the then becomes. The gap is not a distance to be crossed. It is a vibration to be held. If you want to move from the seed to the fruit, you do not need more time. You need a more disciplined consciousness. You must learn to inhabit the now so completely that the then has no choice but to manifest, for the universe cannot sustain a disharmony between your internal frequency and your external experience. In a kingdom known only for its perpetual autumn, a young gardener named Silas was tasked with planting the silver-leaf oak, a tree that, legend claimed, only bore fruit when the gardener reached a state of perfect, unshakable belief. Silas dug his hole in the dry, gray soil. He planted the seed. He watered it with the morning dew. For the first week, Silas stood by the site, his eyes sharp, watching for the first green shoot. By the second week, seeing nothing but dry earth, he began to panic. He wondered if the seed was bad. He wondered if the soil was poisoned. Every few hours, he would kneel and brush away the dirt to see if the seed had sprouted. His doubt was a physical weight. Each time he disturbed the earth to check for progress, he set the growth back by days. The seed was trying to establish its delicate, unseen roots, but Silas's impatient prodding constantly fractured the process. The more he feared failure, the more he looked for signs of it. He began to whisper to the ground, "Why are you taking so long? Why are you failing me?" His neighbor, an elderly woman known for her ancient wisdom, watched him from across the fence. One afternoon, she walked over and said, "Silas, you are not a gardener. You are an inquisitor. You are demanding that the earth provide evidence before you have provided the faith." "But I have been waiting," Silas cried. "I have been standing here for weeks." "Waiting is not the same as tending," she replied. "You are monitoring the delay, and in doing so, you are ensuring it. You are trying to see with your eyes what must first be seen with the spirit. If you cannot leave the seed in the hands of the unseen, you will never see the tree." Silas took a deep breath. He realized the truth. His doubt was the drought. He covered the hole with fresh earth, smoothed it down, and for the first time walked away. He went to his home, made his tea, and sat in his chair, feeling the presence of the tree in his mind as if it were already providing shade. He stopped asking, "Is it growing?" and started saying, "Thank you for the shade." 3 days later, he heard a sound, a soft, triumphant crack of the earth. He walked to the garden to find not a small sprout, but a sapling already 3 feet high, reaching toward the sun as if it had been waiting only for him to stop interfering. The gap had not been a measure of time. It had been a measure of his interference. The lesson of the silver leaf oak is the central pillar of your transformation. You must stop being an inquisitor of your own life. You must stop digging up your seeds to check for progress. To embody this today, you must master the art of holy indifference. This does not mean you are lazy or that you do not care. It means you are so certain of the outcome that you no longer feel the need to chase it. The 2-4-hour silence. For 1 full day, treat your desire as a finished work. Do not speak of it as a goal. Do not complain about its absence. Do not tell anyone you are working on it. Speak of it, in your own mind, as something that is already yours. Feel the relief of the arrival. Feel the weight of the treasure in your hands. The frequency check. Throughout the day, notice your own pulse. If you feel the frantic, high-frequency hum of anxiety, stop. Breathe into the gap. Acknowledge that the discomfort is simply your ego trying to force a physical outcome before the spiritual work is complete. Affirm, "I am the gardener, not the inquisitor." The work is finished in the unseen. It is simply emerging into the seen. By doing this, you remove the friction of impatience. You align your internal state with the truth of the universe, and the universe, always compliant, always reflecting, will begin to accelerate the manifestation of your reality. But wait, there is a secondary danger to this work. As you begin to hold the frequency of your arrival, you may find that the world around you, your friends, your colleagues, even your own habits tries to pull you back into the hallway of the old, delayed reality. They will mirror your old doubts back at you. How do you maintain your frequency when the world refuses to match your new vibration? In our next chapter, we will encounter the 11th hour, that terrifying, magnificent moment where the silence of the process turns into the roar of the result. We will explore why the most intense pressure usually arrives just before the breakthrough. It is the moment when the mirror is most likely to distort, and the moment when you must be the most resolute. Are you ready to face the pressure of the 11th hour, or will you let the world dampen your fire? The light is ready. The switch is yours to hold. Before we proceed to the mysteries of the 11th hour, if this resonance has stirred something within you, I invite you to pause. Like and subscribe to this narrative arc, ensuring that you remain anchored as we navigate the final, transformative stages of this journey. The alignment is accelerating. Be sure you are ready for what follows. The atmosphere is heavy, saturated with the quiet, suffocating tension of a long overdue storm. You are standing in the center of a vast, obsidian-floored chamber. Outside, the world is gray. The sky is a flat, unyielding slate that offers no promise of the sun. You have been here for years, carrying the weight of your prayer like a stone in your chest. You have asked, you have declared, and you have remained steadfast, yet the room remains silent. The phone does not ring. The letter does not arrive. The opportunity remains, by all accounts, a ghost. This is the 11th hour term that the human mind has branded with the red ink of panic. When we hear of the 11th hour, we think of the frantic final minute, the sweat on the brow, the terrifying prospect that the clock will strike 12 and the window will slam shut forever. We view it as a moment of desperation, a last-ditch effort to salvage a sinking ship. But consider the paradox. What if the 11th hour is not the time of exhaustion, but the moment of fullness? The silence you hear is not the silence of absence, it is the silence of orchestration. Imagine an orchestra conductor who stands before his musicians, his baton poised in the air. For an eternity, there is no sound. The silence is absolute, yet it is not empty. Every musician is alert, every instrument is tuned, and every note is prepared. The silence is the necessary container for the symphony that is about to erupt. You see, the 11th hour is the final threshold of spiritual gestation. It is the moment when the physical world finally bows to the pressure of your internal belief. The reason it feels like a period of dread is that you are judging the process by the decay of the exterior rather than the construction of the interior. You are looking at the dark clouds and assuming a drought, while the earth is actually drinking in the final reserves of moisture required for the harvest to bloom. The 11th hour is not the time to despair. It is the time to stand, for the machinery of your desire has finished its work in the unseen and is now, with a soundless finality, breaking through the veil. To deconstruct the 11th hour, one must first abandon the linear concept of time that governs the terrestrial world. In the natural world, results are a consequence of sequence: planting, watering, growing, reaping. But in the spiritual realm, results are a consequence of alignment. The universe does not operate on a clock, it operates on the click of belief. Why does the human mind struggle to grasp this? Because the mind is a machine of memory. It looks at the past to predict the future. It says, "It took 10 years to build this life, so it must take 10 years to change it." It creates a false mathematical law based on past experience. How does this linear expectation create the dread of the 11th hour? By anchoring the soul in the process rather than the presence. If you define your progress by the ticking of the clock, you will always be a slave to the seconds. You will interpret the absence of a result as failure, rather than seeing it as the gestation phase. Let us ask the deeper question. Why does the manifestation appear to wait until the final moment? It is a law of spiritual conservation. Manifestation is governed by the intensity of your consciousness. When you are uncertain, your signal is diffused. It is like a radio wave broadcasting on 1,000 frequencies, none of them strong enough to be heard. As you continue to walk in faith, as you endure the silence and the dry earth, your signal becomes more refined, more singular, and more intense. The 11th hour is the point of critical mass. It is the moment when your internal conviction matches the requirement of the physical form. How, then, do we facilitate this? We must realize that the delay is not the fault of the light. It is the time it took for your hand to reach the switch and flip it with total conviction. Think of a massive, stalled locomotive. You can push with all your might for hours and the wheels won't move an inch. You might cry out, "It is impossible," but the locomotive is not heavy because of the metal. It is heavy because of the inertia of its standing still. The moment the train overcomes that inertia, it moves with its own momentum. The 11th hour is the moment of momentum. It is the final push before the gears lock into place and the journey becomes inevitable. To fear the 11th hour is to stop pushing when the train is already beginning to roll. You must realize that when everything looks still on the surface, the interior is reaching a fever pitch of readiness. You are not running out of time, you are running into your destiny. For 40 years, the keeper of the Grey Cliff Lighthouse, a man named Elias, not to be confused with our previous traveler, kept a single lamp burning on the edge of a jagged, unforgiving coast. The lighthouse served no ships for decades. The village had long ago abandoned the harbor, and the sea lanes were considered dead. Yet, every night, Elias climbed the spiral staircase. He trimmed the wick, he polished the glass, and he filled the oil reservoir. People mocked him. "Why do you waste your energy?" they would ask. There are no ships, and the 11th hour of this town's relevance passed long ago. Elias never argued. He simply performed his duty. He understood a truth the villagers did not. He was not keeping the light for the ships. He was keeping the light for the possibility of a ship. He was maintaining a state of readiness. Then came the year of the great fog phenomenon, so thick and unnatural that the horizon vanished entirely. It was a time of complete, terrifying isolation. For 3 nights, the lighthouse burned with an intensity Elias had never seen. He felt a strange, electric vibration in the air. On the 4th night, his oil began to run dry. The wick sputtered. The light began to dim. He had no more fuel, and the village was too far away to retrieve more in the gale. Elias stood before the dying flame. The 11th hour had arrived. The light was flickering, the darkness was pressing in, and all the labor of 40 years seemed about to end in a whimper. He did not panic. He did not curse the fate that had brought him to this point. He placed his hands on the brass housing of the lamp, closed his eyes, and whispered, "I am the vessel, and the light is not mine to hold, it is mine to reflect." In that moment of total surrender, something shifted. It wasn't an act of human effort. It was a resonance. At the exact second the final drop of oil vaporized, the fog parted. Not slowly, not gradually, but in a sudden, violent tear in the sky. And there, revealed in the darkness, was a massive fleet of lost merchant vessels, their masts shattered, drifting toward the rocks. They saw the lighthouse, or, rather, they saw the beacon of conviction that Elias had maintained, and they corrected their course. They were saved. Elias realized then that the 40 years of nothing happening had not been a waste. They had been the calibration. The 11th hour wasn't a moment of rescue. It was the moment of alignment between his 40 years of faithfulness and the immediate need of the world. The 11th hour is not a threat, it is a promise. It is the proof that you have finally arrived at the threshold where your internal world and the external world can no longer remain separate. To embody this today, you must stop fearing the flicker. When you feel the pressure of your circumstances mounting, when the resources feel like they are running dry, and the silence seems at its loudest, do not interpret it as a sign to stop. Interpret it as the sign that the fog is about to part. The anchor of certainty. When the 11th hour pressure hits, perform the anchoring breath. Stand still, physically and mentally. Take a breath that fills your entire being, and silently state, "The results are not created by the clock. They are created by the call. I am calling, and the answer is already arriving." The release of the outcome. Stop demanding that the manifestation appear in a specific way or at a specific time. Release the how. You are the lighthouse keeper, not the navigator of the ships. Your only job is to keep the flame of your intention pure, steady, and uncompromised. By practicing this, you transform your anxiety into authority. You move from being a victim of the 11th hour to being its master. You understand that the silence was not a void. It was the space where your miracle was being forged. But there is a final, vital secret to this alchemy. Once the fog parts and the ships arrive, what is the next step? Most people get so caught up in the aftermath of the miracle that they lose the very consciousness that summoned it. They forget the 11th hour was a product of their own spirit, and they fall into the trap of becoming historians of their own past success. How do you sustain the miracle once it has broken into your reality? In our next chapter, we will explore the anatomy of impatience. We will dissect why the human heart, having just received the treasure, so often sabotages it through the subtle, poisonous rod of doubt. We are about to look into the shadow side of the 11th hour, where the hardest work truly begins, the work of receiving. The light has arrived, the fog has lifted. But are you prepared to hold the harvest without letting it slip through your fingers? The journey is far from over, and the next step is the most critical of all. If this wisdom has resonated with the deepest part of your own journey, I invite you to leave a single word in the comments. Ready. Let this serve as your personal declaration that you have emerged from the silence and are prepared to command the dawn. Subscribe to the Ark, for the architecture of your new reality is being built even now. Picture a master archer standing upon a precipice, the bow drawn taut, the string biting into the leather of the glove. The arrow is aimed at a target so distant it is but a shimmering point in the heat haze of the horizon. The archer's stance is perfect, the breath is held, and the world seems to collapse into the singular razor-thin line of the trajectory. But then, a subtle change occurs. The archer's fingers begin to twitch. A bead of sweat rolls into their eye, blurring the vision. The archer's focus shifts from the target to the distance, the agonizing expanse of air the arrow must navigate. The hand that holds the bow begins to tremble, not from fatigue, but from the sudden, invasive urge to know, to see the impact, to witness the victory, to force the arrow to arrive before it has even finished its flight. This is the state of the human heart in the throes of impatience. It is the archer who releases the string early, not because the aim was true, but because the weight became intolerable. Impatience is not merely a lack of time, it is a lack of trust in the unseen trajectory of the universe. It is a psychological tremor, a jagged, discordant frequency that ripples through the spirit and destabilizes the very foundation of our intentions. We look at the not yet, and we see a failure of the universe, rather than a necessary span of the flight. We act as if we are the ones responsible for the wind, for the velocity, and for the target itself. In our desperation to shorten the distance, we often cause our own arrows to fall short, landing in the dust at our feet, broken by the very hands that aimed them. The archer who cannot endure the silence of the flight will never know the triumph of the hit. To deconstruct the anatomy of impatience is to strip away its mask of diligence. We often disguise our impatience as ambition, as high standards, or as a noble refusal to accept mediocrity. We say, I am impatient because I am passionate. I am impatient because I care deeply about my purpose. But let us hold this up to the light of the Spirit. Why does the heart truly reach for the bowstring before the command to fire? It is because impatience is, at its core, a sophisticated, highly camouflaged form of doubt. How does this doubt operate within the psyche? It utilizes the recursive loop of the evidence of absence. The mind scans the horizon for the desired result, finds nothing but empty space, and immediately interprets this as a threat. The ego, terrified of the uncertainty, demands proof. When the proof is not provided, the ego labels the situation as delayed or denied. It then triggers an emergency response. Do something. Force it. Make it happen. Why does this doing prove to be the ultimate sabotage? The act of forcing is an acknowledgement of separation. It implies that the goal is an external object that must be captured or coerced into existence. It denies the law that the fulfillment is already a part of your consciousness. When you are impatient, you are vibrating at the frequency of need, not ownership. Need is a vacuum that repels the very thing you seek. For the law of the universe is that we do not get what we want, we get what we are. If you are in a state of needing, you are defining yourself as a person who lacks. How do we break this recursive trap? We must ask, what are we actually monitoring? Are we monitoring the progress of our own inner state, or are we monitoring the mechanics of the outer world? Impatience is the act of digging up a seed to see if it has sprouted. By constantly checking the roots, you deny them the darkness they require to settle. The why behind your impatience is a fundamental fear that the universe will fail you if you do not intervene. The how to overcome it is to shift your anchor. You must stop seeking to manage the arrival and start focusing entirely on the alignment. When your alignment is solid, when your internal state is one of absolute, unwavering ownership of the goal, the impatience dissolves. You no longer need to check the horizon because you are already dwelling in the reality of the achievement. There lived in a coastal city a sculptor named Julian, renowned for his ability to find the form hidden within the stone. He was commissioned to carve a statue of a great sovereign, a work of art that was intended to stand as the centerpiece of the new plaza. The marble block he chose was massive, rough, and encased in layers of dull, gray crust. Julian worked with a precision that bordered on the divine. For months, he did nothing but study the block. He did not touch it with a chisel. He walked around it. He touched it. He sat with it. The villagers began to whisper. He is lazy, they said. He is taking the commission's coin and doing nothing but staring at a rock. Julian's own apprentices grew restless. Master, they pleaded, the deadline approaches. We must start carving. If we do not chip away the excess, the sovereign will never be seen. People are laughing at us. They say we have no statue. Julian looked at his apprentices, his eyes calm and deep as the sea. The sovereign is already inside, he replied. The stone is merely waiting for the removal of what is not the sovereign. If I strike the marble with impatience, I might shatter the very image I seek to reveal. I am not waiting for the statue to be created. I am waiting for the stone to reveal its secrets to me, so that my hand knows exactly where the chisel must fall. When Julian finally began to strike, he did not work with the frantic energy of a man chasing a deadline. He worked with the steady, rhythmic assurance of one who knows the end is already written in the beginning. He did not rush, even when the pressure from the city council grew intense. He did not force a curve or a line that the stone did not suggest. When the shroud was pulled away on the day of the unveiling, the statue was not merely a likeness, it was a revelation. It had a life, a soul, an authority that seemed to breathe. The council stood in stunned silence. Julian had not fought the stone. He had cooperated with the hidden form. He had mastered the impatience that demands a quick result and had instead embraced the patience that reveals a masterpiece. He taught the city that the speed of the result matters less than the accuracy of the manifestation. The sculptor Julian serves as the final, absolute argument against the urgency of the ego. Your life is the block of marble, and your desires are the forms already hidden within it. Your impatience is the frantic, uncoordinated striking of the chisel that threatens to shatter the very thing you love. To embody this truth today, you must cultivate the stillness of the master, the chisel audit. Identify the area of your life where you feel the most pressure. Ask yourself, am I carving or am I hacking? Are your actions coming from a place of calm, inspired clarity, or are they reactions born of fear and the need for validation? The principle of the first stroke. Before you take any action in your pursuit, whether it is writing a proposal, initiating a conversation, or launching a project, take one moment of absolute silence. Ask the spirit, what is the truth of this form? Move only when you feel the internal click of alignment. If you feel the frantic vibration of, I must do this now, or I will lose my chance, stop. You are not ready to carve. Wait until the fear subsides and the certainty takes its place. By practicing this, you cease to be a slave to the ticking clock and become the master of the marble. You move with a grace that is undeniable, a power that is unshakable, and a result that is inevitable. But there is a final, lingering question. If we are the sculptors of our own reality, what happens when the marble seems to resist? What happens when the divine rearranges the furniture of our lives? When doors that we have long held dear are suddenly closed, or when paths we thought were meant for us are abruptly blocked? We often call this suffering. But what if it is something else entirely? What if the closed door is not a wall, but a guide? In our next chapter, we will walk through the architecture of divine rearrangement. We will look into the shadow of the doors that do not open and discover why the greatest blessings of our lives are often hidden behind the rejections we most desperately feared. The statue is emerging, the chips are falling, but the hardest part of the craft is learning to appreciate the beauty of the stone that was removed. Are you ready to see why the no is often the most profound yes of your spiritual existence? The chisel is set. Let us proceed. As we stand at the transition to this deeper understanding, if this revelation has brought you a sense of relief, I invite you to share this wisdom. Like and subscribe to ensure you are notified the moment the next chapter of the design is revealed. Your journey is the sculpture. Make it a masterpiece. Imagine a traveler walking along a high, narrow mountain pass at twilight. The path is treacherous, slick with the remnants of an afternoon rain, and the abyss below is shrouded in a thick, impenetrable mist. Ahead, the traveler sees a magnificent, iron-wrought gate, the threshold to a destination they have yearned for, a place of safety, wealth, and profound fulfillment. They reach out with trembling hands, their heart racing with the expectation of entry. They grasp the cold iron handle and pull with all their strength. The gate does not budge. It is locked with an absolute, immovable finality. The traveler pushes, desperate, their breath hitching in the thinning air. They pound against the metal, crying out into the gathering dark, feeling the cold sting of rejection. They are convinced that this closed gate is an injustice, a failure of their destiny, a sign that they have been abandoned by the very forces they trusted to guide them. But let us pause the scene. Let us rise above the mountain pass, viewing the landscape with the eye of an eagle. From this height, the truth is laid bare. 10 paces beyond that gate, the path completely vanishes. A massive landslide has swept away the cliffside, leaving only a yawning void that would have been invisible to the traveler in the dim light of the evening. The gate was not a barrier to the traveler's success. It was the mechanism of their survival. This is the central paradox of the closed door. We weep for the path that was denied, never realizing that the refusal was, in fact, an act of supreme benevolence. We judge the universe by the immediate sting of the disappointment, while the universe operates on the preservation of our entire soul. To deconstruct the nature of the closed door is to confront the limitations of human perception. We operate in a narrow corridor of vision. We see the immediate desire, the proximate goal, and the surface-level gain. We do not see the intricate, interconnected web of causality that spans the breadth of our lives. Why does the human mind interpret a closed door as a punishment? Because we have been conditioned to view our ego-driven plans as the ultimate blueprint of our life's success. We believe that if we have formulated a goal, that goal must be the highest good. When reality contradicts our plan, we experience a collapse of identity. How does this recursive thinking, the persistent need to justify our own plans, cloud our spiritual intelligence? We constantly ask, why is this happening to me? When the more accurate question would be, what is this moving me away from? The philosophy of divine rearrangement suggests that the universe is constantly in a state of adjustment. Think of your life as a grand, multi-dimensional room. You have walked in with your own furniture, your ideas, your relationships, your ambitions, and you have arranged them based on your current, and often limited, understanding. But the divine is the architect of the entire house. When you begin to move toward a purpose that is greater than what you initially imagined, the divine must rearrange the furniture. It must remove the heavy, outdated pieces that would cause you to trip in the dark. It must clear the floor so that you can accommodate the new, higher vibrational reality you have called in. How does the rearrangement manifest? It often appears as a sudden severance. A job is lost. A relationship dissolves. A contract is voided. To the untrained eye, this is chaos. But to the one who understands the law of belief, this is an act of clearing. It is the removal of the misaligned, the clearing of the path. The why of this process is simple. Nothing that is truly yours can ever be taken from you, and nothing that is not yours can ever stay. The how of navigating it requires a radical shift in perspective. Instead of staring at the closed door and mourning the loss of the handle, one must turn around. The closure of one path is almost always the orchestration of another, often a path that the individual was too timid or too blinded by their own ego to choose for themselves. The closed door is not a wall, it is a redirection. In a bustling city of antiquity, there lived a master navigator named Kalin. His dream was to captain the Silver Star, a legendary vessel that sailed the uncharted northern currents. He had spent his youth studying the stars, honing his craft, and preparing for the day the captaincy would be offered. He had every map, every tool, and every connection necessary to secure the position. When the time came, Kalin presented himself to the Admiralty. He was prepared for his moment of glory. But the Admiralty, to his utter shock, rejected him. Not only did they refuse the captaincy, they banned him from the docks entirely, citing a minor administrative error in his lineage papers. Kalin was devastated. He felt the sting of humiliation. He spent weeks in the taverns, bitter and lost, convinced that his entire life's purpose had been obliterated. He had nothing left but his small, beat-up fishing skiff, a vessel he considered beneath his dignity. One morning, forced by hunger, Kalin took his skiff out to the bay. As he sailed, a sudden, violent tempest, a rogue wind, known only to the locals, swept through the harbor. He watched from the safety of the bay as the Silver Star, setting sail on its maiden voyage with its new, inexperienced captain, was caught in the center of the squall. The ship, overburdened and poorly handled, struck the submerged reef that Kalin had warned the Admiralty about, and it shattered. Kalin realized, with a chill that reached his marrow, that if he had been captain, he would have been on that ship. The rejection, the administrative error, the banishment. It had all been a series of events specifically orchestrated to keep him off the Silver Star on that precise day. Kalen went home, but he did not return to the taverns. He went to his skiff. He realized that his life was not meant to be lived on the Silver Star, but rather he was meant to become the surveyor of the reefs, the man who would eventually map the safe passages for all who followed. The door he had been obsessed with was a death trap. The rejection had been his salvation. He had been rearranged so that he could serve a purpose far greater than he had ever dared to dream. The story of Kalen is the story of every soul who has ever felt the sting of a no. You are not being punished. You are being protected and prepared. The universe is not playing games with your heart. It is refining your direction. To embody this truth today, you must adopt the stance of holy surrender. The rejection audit. Look at the major closed doors of your past. The relationships that ended, the opportunities that vanished, the paths that led to dead ends. For each one, ask, what would my life look like today if that door had stayed open? Trace the timeline. Often, you will realize that had that event gone your way, you would have been trapped, delayed, or fundamentally changed in a way that would have prevented you from achieving who you are today. The thank you practice. When you experience a setback today, a delayed email, a missed meeting, an unexpected change of plans, do not collapse into frustration. Pause, breathe, and say, I am being rearranged. Trust that the universe is moving the furniture. Your only job is to be flexible enough to step into the new room that is being prepared for you. By practicing this, you transform from a victim of circumstance into a partner of the divine. You move with the flow of the river, rather than fighting against the rocks. You realize that your life is not a fixed script that you have to defend, but a living, breathing evolution. But what happens when we do get what we want, yet it doesn't bring the peace we expected? What happens when the goal is achieved, the mountain is climbed, and we find ourselves standing at the top, only to realize the view isn't what we thought it would be? There is a secret to the act of stewardship, a way to carry our blessings so that they don't become burdens. In our next chapter, we will explore the art of digging ditches. We will learn why it is not enough to simply wait for the rain. We must prepare the ground. Even when the sky is bone dry, the rearrangement is complete, the path is clear. Are you prepared to start digging in the dry earth, even when everyone else tells you it is a waste of time? The moisture is coming, but the ditches are your responsibility. Are you ready to pick up the shovel? As the path unfolds, if this truth has helped you release the weight of past rejections, I invite you to share this realization in the comments. Let us collectively declare, I am ready for the new arrangement. Subscribe to the journey, for we are moving into the most practical, labor-intensive, and rewarding phase of our mastery. The ditch is waiting. Imagine a vast, shimmering expanse of the desert at midday. The sun is a white-hot coin suspended in a cloudless, porcelain blue sky. The heat waves dance upon the horizon like restless spirits, distorting the world into a landscape of mirages. In this desolate theater of dust and drought, a group of men stands with shovels in their hands, their skin bronzed and cracked, their eyes reflecting an intensity that defies the logic of their environment. They are digging. They are carving deep, wide channels into the parched earth, sweating in the relentless glare, tossing mounds of dry sand aside with methodical precision. There is no cloud to be seen for 1,000 miles. There is no sound of distant thunder, no cooling breeze, no moisture in the air to suggest that the sky will ever yield anything other than punishing light. To any passerby, they would appear as madmen, squandering their last remaining strength to scar the surface of a dead land. But they are not mad. They are participating in one of the most profound paradoxes of spiritual law. They are creating the container for a blessing that has not yet manifested. This is the inciting observation of the art of digging ditches. We often sit in the dry heat of our own circumstances, praying for the rain of our desires, the promotion, the healing, the connection, the abundance while our hands remain folded in our laps. We wait for the clouds to gather, for the thunder to rumble, for the evidence to appear, believing that only then will it be safe to prepare. But spiritual law operates in reverse. The manifestation does not follow your preparation, it is drawn to it. The ditch is not a reaction to the rain, it is the invitation for the rain to arrive. To deconstruct the act of digging ditches is to dismantle the wall between divine timing and fear-based procrastination. The human mind loves to hide behind the cloak of patience, calling its inactivity discernment. We say we are waiting for the right moment, waiting for a sign, or waiting to be fully qualified. But let us ask the recursive question, why does the heart feel the need to justify its hesitation with such noble language? The answer is fear. We fear that if we prepare and the rain does not come, we will be exposed as fools. We fear the vulnerability of the shovel in the sand. But how does this fear solidify into a cycle of stagnation? By creating a feedback loop of procrastination as prudence. When you tell yourself that you are waiting for a sign, you are actually telling the universe that you require proof before you offer your faith. This is a subtle, yet massive, inversion of the law. You are demanding that the universe prove its power to you, rather than demonstrating your belief in the universe. How does the process of digging ditches invert this energy? It shifts the vibration from passive expectation to active readiness. When you dig, you are physically asserting, I believe the water is coming, and I am making room for it. How does this shift our reality? It changes the nature of our wait. Divine timing is not a state of sitting still. It is a state of inwardly settled expectancy. It has life, movement, and intentionality. When you are in the flow of divine timing, you are acting on the small, quiet nudges that the Spirit provides. You are organizing your life, gathering your tools, and clearing the clutter, all while the sky is still clear. The how of this process requires a transition from the observer to the participator. You must stop looking for the evidence of the rain and start looking for the integrity of your own ditches. Are they wide enough? Are they deep enough? Are they positioned to receive the blessing when it arrives? If you have not dug your ditches, you are not waiting for divine timing. You are procrastinating in the heat, hoping for a miracle that you have not yet made room to receive. In an ancient, arid kingdom plagued by a decade-long drought, 3 kings gathered in the desert to consult an oracle. The land was dying, the cattle were thinning, and the people were on the brink of revolt. The oracle told them, if you wish to survive the coming thirst, you must go into the valley of Elah and dig ditches from the morning until the sun sets. Do this without question, and you shall have more water than your silos can hold. The first king looked at the dry, iron-hard soil, laughed in the face of the oracle, and returned to his palace to wait for the clouds to appear. If the water comes, he reasoned, I will hire men to dig then. Why break my back on a fantasy? The second king took his men to the valley, but he dug with half a heart. He scratched the surface, moving only a few inches of dirt, keeping one eye on the horizon the entire time. Every hour he would stop, look at the blue sky, and complain. There is nothing here. This is a waste of royal time. He dug, but he did not believe, and his doubt made the ground feel twice as hard. The third king, the youngest of the 3, approached the task with the intensity of a man who had already tasted the water. He didn't look at the sky. He didn't listen to the grumbling of his lords. He and his soldiers dug with a rhythmic, fierce dedication. They dug deep, intricate channels that snaked across the valley floor. They removed the rocks. They cleared the debris. They channeled the earth with a vision of a rushing torrent. They worked until their hands bled, and the sun burned their shoulders, acting not as men digging in a desert, but as men building a highway for an approaching tide. By late afternoon, when the strength of the young king's men was almost spent, a distant sound began to grow, a low, rhythmic rumble that shook the ground. The horizon turned a bruised, deep purple. The clouds did not drift in, they descended like a curtain. When the rain fell, it did not fall as a drizzle. It fell as a deluge. The first king's land was flooded in a chaotic mess, the water running off the hard ground and causing devastation. The second king's shallow ditches overflowed instantly, his fields turning to mud and his crops washing away. But the third king's valley became a reservoir of life. His deep, well-prepared channels caught the torrent, tamed it, and carried it into every corner of his parched territory. He was prepared not because he knew the future, but because he trusted the instruction enough to perform the labor of faith. The drought you are currently navigating is not a sign of absence, it is the season of the ditch. The universe is waiting to see if you are serious enough to prepare for the breakthrough you are requesting. To embody this truth today, you must identify your ditch, the preparation audit. What is the one thing you are praying for? If it arrived tomorrow, what would you need to have in place to manage it? If you are praying for a massive influx of capital, are your financial systems prepared to steward it? If you are praying for a life partner, have you cleared the emotional debris of your past to make space for them? If you are praying for a creative career, are your skills honed, your portfolio ready, and your mindset clear? The act of diligence. Choose one ditch-digging task today. It must be a task that requires effort, one that you have been putting off because you don't see the rain yet. Buy the supplies. Write the plan. Clear the space. Do not look for the cloud. Focus on the depth of the trench. Dig until you feel the sweat of faith. By doing this, you stop being a beggar of the heavens and become a builder of your own vessel. You align your physical reality with your spiritual belief, and you demonstrate to the universe that you are not just a dreamer, but a steward of the promised abundance. But there is a final, critical question. Once the ditch is dug, once the water begins to flow, how do we prevent ourselves from becoming historians of our own disappointments? How do we ensure that we don't look back at the dry desert of the past and start mourning the hardship, thereby stalling the very momentum we have worked so hard to build? There is a trap in looking back, a way in which our own memories of the struggle can become the next barrier to our evolution. In our next chapter, we will explore the art of living as if. We will discuss how to shift your identity so completely that the then becomes your now. We are moving toward the final collapse of time. Are you ready to stop being a chronicler of what was and start being the author of what is? The water is in the ditches, but the vessel must now be manned. Shall we move forward? If this labor of faith has ignited a new resolve within you, I invite you to leave a sign of your preparation. Comment. The ditch is dug. Subscribe to this arc, for we are approaching the final synthesis of the law. The harvest is coming. Be certain you are ready to hold it. Imagine a grand, cavernous hall, the foyer of an estate that has not yet been built. The air is cool and smells faintly of cedar and unfinished potential. Standing in the center of this empty expanse is an individual holding a key. They are not waiting for an architect. They are not waiting for a permit. They are walking through the space with the deliberate, confident grace of an owner, stepping over piles of sawdust as if they were plush, hand-woven carpets. They place a phantom vase upon a phantom pedestal. They pull out a chair that exists only in the architecture of their mind and seat themselves with a calm, practiced familiarity. To any onlooker, they would appear to be a specter moving through a void. But to the seeker, the estate is not empty. It is furnished, populated, and vibrant. They are living in the as-if. This is the most challenging, and perhaps the most potent, paradox of the spiritual journey. We are told to wait for the evidence, yet the law commands that we provide the evidence ourselves through the posture of our spirit. The as-if is not a lie, it is a higher truth. It is the act of stepping into the reality you have called in before the physical world has finished catching up to your conviction. The hallway of the past has been abandoned. You are now standing in the foyer of your future, and the only thing missing from the room is the hesitation in your own heart. To understand the mechanics of living as if, one must first dismantle the ego's obsession with historical data. The human mind is a professional historian. It keeps a meticulous record of every time we failed, every time we were rejected, and every time the rain did not fall. We view these records as wisdom, calling it learning from experience. But recursive thinking reveals a darker reality. This is simply the act of tethering yourself to your own disappointments. Why do we cling to this history? Because it provides a sense of continuity. The ego prefers a miserable, familiar past to a glorious, unknown future. It fears the as-if because it requires the death of the person you have been in order to make room for the person you are becoming. How does the act of as-if actually function as a catalyst for manifestation? It operates on the principle of resonant frequency. The universe does not respond to your words or your prayers. It responds to your vibration. If your internal state is waiting for the gift, you are vibrating at the frequency of the needing. If your internal state is stewarding the gift, you are vibrating at the frequency of owning. When you live as if, you are effectively bridging the distance between the potential and the actual by eliminating the perceived gap. You are no longer reaching, you are residing. How does one achieve this shift? It is done through the cultivation of future memory. You must stop looking back to see where you went wrong, and start looking forward to remember where you are going. You must treat your desires as completed facts, as memories of an outcome that has already occurred. This is not a flight of fancy. It is a rigorous exercise in consciousness. You are instructing the substance of your life, the people, the opportunities, the circumstances to align with the reality you have decided is true. When you move, speak, and act from the vantage point of your fulfillment, you are no longer a person in a hallway. You are a person at home in the house of your own creation. There was once a young musician named Alara who lived in a cramped, silent attic. Her dream was to perform in the great hall of the capital, a place she had never even visited. She had no instrument, no coach, and no invitation. For years, she had been a historian of silence, mourning the lack of music in her life. Then, she encountered a teacher who gave her a single, cryptic instruction. If you wish to hold the concert, you must first clear the stage. Alara returned to her attic. She cleared every piece of unnecessary furniture. She scrubbed the floors until they shone. She bought a single, small chair and placed it in the center of the room. She began to treat the attic not as a place of lack, but as the private stage for her future performance. Every morning she rose, dressed in her finest clothes, and sat in that chair. She closed her eyes and heard the music. She felt the vibrations of the cello in her chest. She stood and took bows to an audience she could not see but could absolutely feel. When people asked what she was doing, she did not say, "I am waiting to become a musician." She said, "I am practicing for my residency at the Great Hall." She lived her life as if the concert were already scheduled. She studied the history of the composers. She learned the etiquette of the stage. She walked with the posture of a performer. She didn't look at her empty hands. She looked at the phantom bow she held in her grip. Months later, a traveling diplomat happened upon her home. He found her in her attic, sitting in her chair, listening to the symphony that only she could hear. He was so struck by her profound, unshakable conviction, by the way she moved, as if she were already surrounded by the weight of her success, that he offered to sponsor her education at the conservatory. Within 3 years, Alara stood upon the stage of the Great Hall. The music was exactly as she had heard it in the attic. She had not waited for the hall to build her. She had built the hall within her, and the physical world had simply stepped aside to accommodate her reality. Alara's success was not a result of luck. It was the result of a rigorous refusal to believe the lie of the present circumstance. You too are an artist, and your life is the stage. The as if is the performance that dictates the reality. To embody this truth today, you must perform the stage clearing exercise. The environment audit. Look at your immediate surroundings, your office, your home, your digital space. Do they reflect your current state of waiting? Or do they reflect the life you are calling in? If you are calling in a life of professional excellence, does your workspace look like the office of a professional? If you are calling in a life of deep, meaningful partnership, does your home have space for another? Start clearing the attic. Make physical room for the manifestation. The embodiment protocol. For the next 24 hours, carry yourself as if the desire is already a finished fact. When you speak to others, do not speak from the perspective of someone who is trying. Speak from the perspective of someone who has arrived. Feel the weight of the accomplishment in your posture. Do not look for evidence. You are the evidence. By doing this, you stop the circular thinking of the hallway and begin the linear advancement of the manifest. You are no longer a student of the lack. You are a master of the presence. But as you start to live as if, you will notice something peculiar. You will start to forget the old version of yourself. The people, the thoughts, and the habits that defined your hallway identity will begin to drift away. This is not loss. This is liberation. However, there is a dangerous pitfall, the audit of the soul. How do we ensure that we are not simply building a new, more expensive prison of expectations? We must learn to distinguish between the ego's craving for status and the soul's mandate for expansion. In our next chapter, we will perform the audit of the soul. We will look into the mirror of our own intentions to ensure that we are not just rearranging the furniture of our lives, but that we are truly walking toward our most authentic, divinely guided destiny. The attic is cleared, the stage is set, and the phantom music is beginning to grow into a roar. Are you ready to see what is hidden beneath the habits you are about to shed? The audit is about to begin. If you are ready to stop waiting and start inhabiting your future, I invite you to declare it. Comment, I am already here. Subscribe to the journey, for the collapse of time is now in full motion. The performance of your life is beginning. Do not miss your cue. Imagine a room, sparse and dimly lit, where the only furniture is an ancient, silver-backed mirror that stretches from floor to ceiling. A person sits before it, not to adjust their collar or check for the fatigue in their eyes, but to confront the architecture of their own speech. Outside, the world is a clamor of demands, a cacophony of sirens, digital notifications, and the relentless ticking of 1,000 clocks. But here, in this quiet, the sound is internal. It is the echo of one's own monologue. The observer watches their own lips move as they whisper the justifications they have used for years. It is taking so long. I am doing my best, but the world is resistant. Perhaps I am not meant for this. As the words leave their lips, they see them materialize in the air. Not as sound, but as physical barricades, dark, heavy stones that pile up at the base of the mirror, slowly obscuring the view of the horizon. This is the incisive truth of the soul's audit. We are not victims of the world's delay. We are the gatekeepers of our own atmosphere. The words we utter in the secret chambers of our minds are the construction materials for our reality. When we speak in the language of postponement, we are literally erecting walls between our present self and our desired future. The paradox is that we believe we are simply reporting the news of our lives, telling it like it is, when, in reality, we are the ones writing the script for the catastrophe we are observing. To stand before the mirror is to realize that the one we have been waiting for, the one who holds the key to the hallway, is the one who has been talking themselves into the cage. To audit the soul is to perform a rigorous dissection of the language we use to define our existence. Why do we default to the vocabulary of scarcity? Why does the human mind find such profound comfort in the phrases eventually, maybe one day, and if only? The answer lies in the psychological safety of the neverland. By keeping our goals perpetually in the future, we insulate ourselves from the risk of the present. If the goal is always coming, we never have to face the vulnerability of actually having it. We never have to test our character against the reality of our abundance. How does this linguistic loop create a recursive cycle of failure? It operates through the feedback loop of identity. When you repeat the phrase "it is taking so long," you are not just describing a time interval. You are defining yourself as a person who experiences delay. You are internalizing the identity of the struggler. How do we break the hold of this linguistic architecture? We must utilize the gatekeeper protocol. Why is the mouth the most powerful instrument in the human anatomy? Because the word is the seed of the manifestation. The universe, in its absolute, mechanical obedience, does not distinguish between a declaration of what is and a description of what we fear. It treats every spoken thought as a command. If you declare, "I am behind," the universe will organize the circumstances of your life to reflect that distance. If you declare, "My good is moving toward me now," the universe will adjust the timing of your encounters to match that signal. How do we transition from being the historian of disappointment to the prophet of fulfillment? It requires a brutal, unflinching honesty. We must stop using reasonable language to mask our fears. We must stop calling our hesitation discernment and call it what it is, a lack of faith. The audit of the soul demands that we interrogate our own justifications. When we catch ourselves speaking of the gap, we must immediately pivot to the language of the arrival. It is a discipline of the highest order, the ability to be a sovereign ruler over the borders of your own mind. In the city of Oak Haven, the records of every citizen's life were kept by the royal scribe, a man named Malachi. It was said that Malachi's ink was not made from soot and water, but from the raw intentions of the heart. Whatever he wrote in the great ledger of the city became the immutable law for that citizen's path. For many, Malachi's ledger was a grim account. He recorded their complaints, their fears, and their repeated stories of bad luck. A woman would come to his desk and say, "I am destined for poverty, for my father was poor." Malachi would write it down. A man would say, "I have missed my chance. The market has passed me by." Malachi would write that down too. And thus, their lives became a manifestation of their own dictated limits. One day, a young woman named Seraphina approached the scribe. She had lost her business, her home, and her reputation. But she had spent the previous week in total silence, scrubbing her mind of every grievance she had ever harbored. She stood before the great desk. Malachi dipped his pen in the ink, ready to record her lament. "Tell me your plight," he muttered, "so I may write the history of your end." Seraphina did not speak of her lost home. She did not speak of the market. She spoke with a voice that felt like the morning sun. "Write this," she said. "Seraphina is the architect of a new dawn. Every stone that was taken from her foundation is being replaced with gold. She is not arriving. She has already arrived." Malachi paused, his pen hovering. "That is not the truth of your bank account," he countered. "The truth of my account is a reflection of a past that no longer exists," she replied. "Write the truth of my spirit." Malachi, intrigued by the singular vibration of her voice, set aside the black ink. He reached for a hidden vial of golden pigment, kept only for the rare souls who dared to override their own history. He wrote exactly what she commanded. Within days, the city began to shift around Seraphina. People who had ignored her suddenly saw her with new eyes. Opportunities that were closed began to manifest. She was not working harder. She was simply living within the authority of the words she had spoken. She had audited her soul, removed the ink of her old, failing story, and replaced it with the golden script of her true identity. She learned that the scribe of her life was not the world, it was her own tongue. Seraphina's transformation is the blueprint for your own liberation. You have been writing your own history in the ink of your complaints, and you wonder why your life reads like a tragedy. It is time to reach for the golden ink. To embody this truth today, you must assume the role of the royal scribe of your own reality. The 24-hour gatekeeping. For the next full day, act as if every word you speak is being recorded in a permanent ledger that will manifest as your reality. If you are about to say, "It's so hard," stop. Replace it with, "The work is deep, and the reward is great." If you are about to say, "I don't know when this will happen," stop. Replace it with, "The timing is perfect, and I am ready." The audit of the inner monologue. Before you sleep tonight, sit in the quiet room. Write down the 3 most common phrases you use to describe your stalled situation. Now, rewrite them from the perspective of the already arrived. If you say, "I'm waiting for a breakthrough," rewrite it as, "I am currently living in the strength of my breakthrough." By doing this, you are not lying to yourself. You are correcting the record. You are aligning the script of your life with the architecture of your spirit. But there is a final mystery to be unveiled. If we can write our own history, what happens when we stand before the ultimate authority of our own existence? What happens when the as-if and the audit align to produce the final, grand culmination? We are approaching the edge of the map. In our final chapter, we will discuss the sovereign of time. We will look into the heart of the 11th hour and see why the most profound miracles require not just a change of words, but a complete dissolution of the self that believes it needs a miracle in the first place. The audit is complete. The golden ink is dry. Are you prepared to step into the presence of your own sovereignty? The threshold is silent, and the final door is waiting. Shall we cross into the light? If this audit of the spirit has revealed the power of your own voice, I invite you to declare your authority. Comment, "I am the scribe." Subscribe to the journey, for we are moving toward the final activation. Your life is the story, write it in gold. Imagine standing in a vast, circular chamber at the heart of an ancient temple. The walls are not made of stone, but of time itself, shifting, translucent layers of history and possibility that pulse with a soft, bioluminescent glow. In the center of the chamber stands the very same brass and oak door that we encountered in the first chapter. It remains imposing. It remains grand. But as you look at it now, with the clarity earned through the audit, the ditch digging, and the relentless discipline of the as-if, you notice something that was hidden from your eyes when you were a prisoner of the hallway. You notice that there is no keyhole, there is no lock, there is no barrier on the other side. You reach out, your hands steady, your heart devoid of the frantic vibration of need. You grip the handle, and it turns with the silent, effortless smoothness of a mechanism that has been waiting for decades for the gentle touch of a master. You push, and the door does not merely open, it vanishes, dissolving into light, revealing that you were never standing in a hallway at all. You were standing in the center of an infinite, open landscape, holding a handle that was never attached to anything. This is the sovereign of time, the realization that you were never a victim of the hours, but the one who gave those hours their meaning. The not yet was a projection. The someday was a hallucination. In the kingdom of the sovereign, time is not a master, it is a servant. And you, the observer who has finally mastered the art of being, are the one who dictates the pace of the wind. To become a sovereign of time is to possess a quality that the world often mistakes for detachment, but which the spirit knows as holy indifference. This is not the indifference of the lazy, nor the apathy of the broken. It is the profound, unshakable certainty of the sun, which rises each morning without ever checking to see if the world is ready for its light. Why does the ego struggle so violently against this state? Because the ego thrives on carrying on the high-frequency drama of worry, the validation of effort, and the adrenaline of the chase. To be indifferent to the timing of the manifestation feels to the ego, like a total surrender of control. How, then, does the recursive paradox of surrendering control to gain sovereignty work? It works by shifting the locus of power. When you worry, you are essentially telling the universe that the outcome depends on your anxiety, that if you stop suffering, the miracle will stop being earned. But this is a fundamental misunderstanding of the law. You do not earn the miracle, you align with it. When you achieve holy indifference, you are saying, I am so certain of my fulfillment that I no longer require the evidence to confirm my faith. How does this state collapse time? It stops the friction of impatience. When you are no longer vibrating with the need for a result, you remove the counter-intentions that have been holding the result at bay. You create a vacuum, a pure, still space that the universe rushes to fill. The sovereignty of time is found in the stillness. It is the ability to walk through the world with your hands open, knowing that what is yours cannot be withheld, and what is not yours can never stay. Why must we cultivate this now? Because the 11th hour is not just a moment, it is a permanent residence. When you become the sovereign of time, you cease to live in the sequence of events and begin to live in the totality of the result. You act, not to get, but to express. You are no longer a person running against the clock. You are the one who gives the clock its rhythm. You have realized that the finished work is not a destination at the end of the line. It is the very ground upon which you stand. In the great watchmaking city of Valerius, there lived a master named Silas, who was famous for creating the eternal clock machine that could allegedly measure the span of a human life. The city's elite paid him fortunes to learn his secrets, hoping to gain mastery over their own aging, their success, and their limited days. Silas would invite his students into his workshop, where he would show them thousands of gears, springs, and pendulums. He would let them study the mechanics for hours, but he never told them the secret of the clock. One day, a student, exhausted by the complexity, collapsed and cried out, "Master, the complexity is killing me. I cannot calculate the timing of my own success. The gears are too many, and the time is too short." Silas walked over to the eternal clock, opened the casing, and took out the mainspring. He placed it in the student's hand. The student looked at it, confused. "This is just a piece of metal, master. It has no time. It has no teeth." "Exactly," Silas replied. "The gears are the world. The complexity is your own mind. The movement, the sovereign will that pushes the spring is you." Silas then proceeded to take the clock apart, piece by piece, until nothing was left but the table. "You have been trying to measure the time," he said, "because you are afraid of the end. But the sovereign does not measure time, he animates it. When you stop being the gear that is being pushed, and start being the will that pushes, you realize there is no time left to fear. There is only the perpetual now of your own creation." The student stopped trying to fix the clock. He sat in silence, and for the first time, he felt the rhythm of his own heartbeat. He realized that the clock had never been the master. It had been a mirror reflecting his own fear of missing out. He left the workshop, never to return, because he no longer needed to measure his life. He was finally living it. The lesson of the watchmaker is the final threshold of your journey. You are not a gear in the machine of the world. You are the animating will. The sovereignty of time is your natural birthright, waiting to be reclaimed from the hands of the clock. To embody this truth today, you must enter the state of completion. The sovereign declaration. Find a moment of absolute stillness. Close your eyes and visualize your goal, not as a thing in the distance, but as a reality you are currently occupying. Feel the texture of it, the reality of it, the peace of it. Then, say aloud, "I am the sovereign of this day. I do not chase the result. I live as the result. My timing is the rhythm of the divine, and all things are coming to pass in perfect order." The act of holy indifference. for the remainder of this day, when you feel the pressure of an external deadline, a judgment, or a lack, smile. Acknowledge the pressure, but do not bow to it. Remind yourself, the sun rises without permission, and my good manifests without struggle. By doing this, you step out of the hallway of the clock and into the palace of your own creation. You are no longer a servant of the when, you are the master of the what. But as you stand in this sovereign state, looking out over the landscape of your life, you might feel a strange sensation, the sensation that the journey we have taken together is not an end, but a beginning. You have been trained. You have audited your soul. You have dug your ditches. You have learned to live as if, but the world is still out there, and it is waiting for a sovereign to bring the light. In our final moments together, consider this. What will you do with this time, now that you are no longer its prisoner? Will you retreat into the solitude of your own success, or will you use this sovereignty to change the atmosphere of the world around you? The final bridge is not toward a new teaching. It is toward your own unique expression in the world. The chapter concludes, but the masterpiece is only just beginning. Are you ready to lead? If you have arrived at this sovereign realization, leave a testament to your authority. Comment, I am the sovereign. Your journey has been the greatest construction of all. Walk now in the light of the finished work, the way is open, and the time is yours.